No. It's impossible for anybody to gather all information that a decentralized system of decision making in any area, in education, in research, and of course also in economics, in markets, it's impossible for a planner to have all that information and substitute. This was a major debate in the early 20th century, which was won first by the economists of the Austrian School of Economics. Then it seemed that they were overtaken by some economists who introduced mathematical methods in calculating the equilibrium prices in the economy. And when the Soviet Union fell and it was a fact that it was impossible to plan properly, this discussion, let's say, disappeared. But it was very relevant in the 20s and 30s of the 20th century, and it had effect over other areas of debate. Yes.
Okay, you mentioned the 20s and the 30s, and
yes.
Here we are in the next century. Would the congruity of those circles have been very different in the 1920s vis-a-vis 2009?
Probably.
Given the development of economics as a science, as you prefaced your remarks, and number two, the development of information systems,
correct,
which are much more readily available to both market participants and economists.
Correct. The introduction of computers in the 60s was let's say, the last try at this idea that planning is possible, but it didn't work. What we can say probably is that this area now is bigger, but still there is no way that a planner can substitute for the decentralized decision making. For example, I worked for a firm in which the only decision that the owners, the founders and owners did is set up the model and keep control of 2 or 3 key variables. The rest is just belief that the model works, and 15 years of experience show that it can. So it's highly decentralized decision making. Trying to control all that is a possibility. Some other models in the same industry try to control much more. It's a different approach. But not even those who try to plan to the very lowest stage in the organization can know everything that happens there. There is an element of individual context and conduct that hasn't changed. And the complexity also of the modern economy has changed a lot too. That is, the degree of specialization that you get in each profession is much bigger now. The amount of knowledge that is produced every 3-4 years doubles. It's even harder now to keep pace. Yes?
I think there's a basic flaw, though, in all economic theory, because it's basically theory. A lot of theories are based on certain things being held constant, and that's not true in the real world. All the models that have been developed based on the fact that they are constants at all times.
Mm-hmm.
That's not true. The second thing about knowledge is that there is more access to knowledge, but we're really no more knowledgeable now than we were before.
Yes.
Okay, and then the other thing is that economic theory is based on rational thought, and humans do not make rational decisions.
Well, let me explain a little on that. Yes.
I was just going to say, actually, the difference between a static and a dynamic economic model. Mm-hmm. The fallacy which always comes in, and there's a very fine book on that, The Accuracy of Economic Observations, brings forth the fact that modeling or econometrics doesn't work.
Correct.
Because of the input that goes into trying to develop the output.
Well, that's why my introduction was going to be longer than the actual analysis of the cost of this. You are around the problem. The problem is a problem of how science develops and whether the model of the natural sciences is the model for social sciences. This was a discussion that it was well developed in the early 20th century, but today the mainstream has, let's say, decided that the model is that of physics. Basically, everything is complex. We have to develop models, test them, and see if they work. And if they work, we don't say the model is right, we say it's tentative. So everything is like in a constant mess. But not everybody in the profession shared that vision or that epistemology, that theory of how knowledge is attained in economics. We have a separate school that is basically the continuation of the classical economists, okay? That developed in the continent and then went back to the UK and the United States when the Second World War, that has a totally different approach. The approach is that social sciences have its origin in logic, because we know the basic element that starts the chain of events, which is human action. There is no theory like that in physics or in any natural sciences. Objects don't have a purpose. So purpose and action are the basic axiom of this way of seeing economics. And for this part of economics, basically is the Austrian school and their influence on the UK, for example, Lionel Robbins of the London School of Economics, and in the United States with less influence on the mainstream because there was a huge powerhouse in Chicago, for example. The Austrians believe clearly that forecast is impossible. That you can always have a framework in which you can perhaps have an idea what would happen, but forecast is impossible because of the complexity of the causes. What economics is a tool, like, and you can use other social sciences, is a tool to explain history, what happened. Forecasting, it's basically impossible for this kind of school of economics. And as you can see, this difference is not only in their view on forecasting. Their difference is also in the power of people who are with the forecast trying to plan and take decisions for everybody else. They also are the people who say that this part is much more complex and bigger than what economists know. Okay? So, what is common to any school of economics is the object of the study. The object of the study is the human action in this sphere, which is people with personal goals, working, saving, investing, therefore creating wealth in a framework, an institutional framework, and a culture which determine each other. The difference is how much, based on your theory and your understanding, are you prepared to tweak here and there the institutional framework, or try to force people in any of these areas to do different things. And the difference